Hi everyone, I'm Sania Farooqui and welcome to the Sania Farooqui Show, a podcast where we bring together voices from around the world to unpack critical issues on peace, justice, gender equality and inclusive leadership. In partnership with IPS News, each episode dives deep into the people and stories shaping our global future. In this episode, we turn our focus to Lebanon, a country marking 50 years since the start of its civil war in 1975. Half a century on, the war's legacy still looms large: unresolved trauma, missing people, lack of accountability, and a peace that many argue is fragile and incomplete. To explore what peace really looks like, especially through a feminist and justice-centered lens, I'm joined by Lina Abou-Habib, Director of Asfari Institute of Civil Society and Citizenship at the American University of Beirut. Lina is a pioneering voice in the region, with decades of experience working at the intersection of feminist leadership, public policy, and post-conflict reconstruction. Lina has steered key global initiatives, serving as the chair of the Doria Feminist Fund, secretary of the Urgent Action Fund, and former chair of the board of AWID, a prolific author with more than 25 publications on feminist policy reforms, post-conflict reconstruction, and inclusive development. Her insights are regularly shared in the international media and UN forums. So in our conversation, we unpack why women's experiences of conflict remain largely invisible in formal peace processes, how militarizations continue to shape daily life, and what it would take to build a just, inclusive, and truly sustainable peace in Lebanon and beyond. So, Lina, thank you so much. It is truly wonderful to have you on the Sania Farooqui Show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Sania. It's a pleasure for me to be talking to you about these important and timely issues.
So, like you said, timely. This year marks the 50th anniversary of the Lebanese Civil War. How do you think the conflict's legacy, in terms of, how it continues to shape Lebanon today, particularly for women and peace-building efforts?
That's a very important question, Sania. Also, as you said, because it's the 50th anniversary for the start of the Lebanese Civil War. When the war started in 1975, I was 13. When it ended, I was 28. And so I'm a particular generation who is still, aware enough to remember the details of the war. But also we will not be there for a long time. I think we're the last generation who is able to remember these 15 years of war. And as the war ended in 1990, there is something that I share with young people as an important question. The war in Lebanon ended in 1990 through a peace agreement which was brokered and facilitated in Saudi Arabia, in Taif, and so in the city of Taif. And so, of course, it's called the Taif Peace Agreement. Oftentimes when I ask young people, and it's 1990, it's not really in the distant past, I asked young people, undergraduate students at the UB, what is the Taif Agreement? Very few young people know what is the Taif Agreement. And then I experimented one day, and I asked the students, say, okay, could you do some research and find some footage, find something visual about the Taif Agreement, and let me know, what did you feel about it? And the kids researched and brought some, pictures. And the first conclusion they had, or the first, stark observation, was that there were no women in the room. There were no women in the room. All the pictures of the most important contemporary process, which is the Lebanon peace process, the process that, officially ended the war, there is not one woman. The war lords got together, divided the pie, and then every now and then, when they disagree on how the pie is divided, they fight amongst each other again until they do a new calculation. Meanwhile, no women were there. No women were recognized in terms of how they were affected by 15 years of war. What were the different roles they had during that war? And also what constitutes, and I think that's the most important question, Sania, what is peace building? What is just and sustainable peace for women and girls in Lebanon? And what we now in conversations today, and I want to, hats off to a very dear friend of mine who is leading an amazing community-based project. Her name is Jumana, and she works with something like since 2018. And look at how recent this is.
Mm-hmm.
She's been working with something like 400 women, grassroots from all over the country, different ages, in trying to address exactly this question. What was your experience during the war as women?
Yeah.
For those who are my generation? For the younger generation, what do you want to know about? And then for everybody, what is peace for you? What constitutes peace for you? And how are you playing a role in building this peace? We've never had this process, Sania. We've never, one of the deals for ending the war in Lebanon is basically through a general amnesty law.
Yeah.
A general amnesty law meant that you didn't recognize all the pain, you didn't recognize all the suffering, you didn't bring justice. You just said, let's turn the page, move on. And one major, and I think historical mistake that we still pay the price right now is the institutionalization of impunity. Impunity became part of modern day Lebanon. So when you have militia men who have committed atrocious and heinous crimes during the war, and they got away with it, then it's okay, Sania, if a guy kills his wife, he will get away with it because there's been impunity for mass murders. So impunity for feminicide or gender-based crimes within the private sphere is normalized. It's no big deal. And, when you were saying it's a timely conversation, it's very timely also now as we see Syria unfold in this new transition. And as we see that, with great worry that crimes against women have started again, you can almost read what's going to come after.
Yeah.
Impunity will generate more impunity. It will make impunity. It will socialize and normalize impunity. It will institutionalize it, and there is no end to it. And therefore, we cannot speak of peace.
Before I get to my second question, where I want to talk about the significant role women have played in peace building at grassroots levels, and if you can share examples of how Lebanese women have been leading initiatives. You've given an example, but just to go back to what you were talking about, the youngsters whom you had asked to, give you some historic research on of what happened during the war. What was their reaction when they found out through their work or through the research that they had done that actually there weren't any women? And do you think we are at that place right now in Lebanon where you can say it started from zero, but now we have XYZ number of women participating?
Yes, again, an interesting prompt. First of all, and I think my generation wouldn't have found this, weird. There was actually a kind of a shock that the whole scene of peace building was only men. It was their own realization. And then, and that's the second part of the story, which is even more so interesting. Many of them went and asked their parents. And many of them had asked their parents before, tell us about your childhood, tell us about the war. In both instances, whether they were asking them before as a matter of general knowledge, or whether they were asking them as a result, after seeing this and they wanted to know more, most parents refused to talk to their children, to their adult children. They're not, undergrad students, so they would be 18, 19, 20. These are mature, young adults.
Yeah.
They refused to talk to them about the war, and which circles back to what I was saying. for impunity to be internalized and accepted, you need also to go through an intentional amnesia. You need to make yourself
Get everything.
forget what had happened. And of course, we all know that you can never forget, that you only end up internalizing the trauma and ruining your life with it and ruining the life of everybody. And also, we do know now that trauma is generational. You end up passing it on. And of course, what helps, what encourages you, or what strengthen this passing on of the trauma, is the fact that the war simply has not ended. That you have armed conflicts that happens every now and then. The fragility that you talked about, we see it every now and then. We see this fragility, and also I think one important part is that with or without the war, and in Lebanon and in the region, our societies, our communities are, I would say, commonly and naturally militarized. People own guns, people own arms. And it's part of being a man. It's part of the protective role. So, and we all know that this has never facilitated, freedom or the sense of safety, etc. So you have impunity, you have a total amnesia, and you have the possibility of a recurrence, because the basic tools of armed conflict and violence are within reach of almost everybody. And so I think one thing that we see within our circles is that people just don't want to talk about it. People don't want to talk about it, don't want to remember it. And this is where it's a little bit, it's very problematic, because without doing this exercise, we're not going to heal and we're not going to move forward towards peace. And one way in which, as a post-war state, we refuse to deal with it is the fact that we've never been able to have, I think probably we're the only country in the world that doesn't have a history book that is taught at school. It doesn't exist. Our kids are taught history up till World War II. And then there's a complete gap. There's not one story that everybody kind of agree that there was a consensus, or at least a story that was co-created, or at least the belief that, okay, we had different experiences, but let's honor all these experiences. All of them are truth for different people. We do not have a history book. And how can we conceive of understanding what happened, avoiding it, without a history book?
I mean, that just sounds like an entire generation has grown up without knowing anything, without even having access or without awareness. How do you think this impacts like the justice system towards peace building process? Because when you don't know what the country has gone through, you're not aware. Of course, I'm talking about the youngsters who would perhaps be the future, are part of the peace process currently. How is that impacting where Lebanon's peace building execution is going or headed towards?
Again, another great question, and I want to answer it with an example. And I think the most important drive for truth has been through the work of a committee of families, essentially women, of the disappeared during the war. This committee is headed by a very, very dear friend of mine, and she just released her biography. And Sania, I would like to invite you. We're launching her biography in September.
I'd be more than happy to attend that.
It's mind-blowing, because this amazing woman, who was very young when somebody knocked on her door at the beginning of the war, armed guys, and they asked her husband to come, and they told her, "Don't worry, ma'am, 5 minutes and he will come back." Well, it's been 45 years. And this woman gathered women from all over the countries, women who are related to men who disappeared, who were, across the front lines, who are from different ideologies, different militias, different political parties. And she was the kind of the gel that got all these people together. I mean, they are essentially women. I know she told me, her name is Wadad. She told me that of the 18,000 people who remain forcibly disappeared in Lebanon, 94% are men. But it's mostly predominantly women who have been leading since then the fight to recognize the disappeared. So why is this important? It's important because it's a struggle led, and you know that this has happened in other parts of the world. It has happened in Latin America. It has happened in the former Eastern Bloc. Women have led nationwide initiatives, not just to look for their loved ones, because at the end of the day, everybody knows that it's finding this person alive is least likely, but it actually in seeking the truth and in linking justice with truth. And truth as your right. It's my right to know the truth. It's my right to, turn the page knowing what has happened. And these are stories of something like 18,000 families who will, unless this truth
comes out,
unless they reach this truth, unless what they have been through has been recognized, they will never have peace. And again, I want to link it to what is happening in Syria and think about 150,000 in Syria. Nobody knows where they are. Nobody knows whether they're alive or not. And how important it is for this country that has gone from decades of brutal dictatorship to a very unstable transition. How can we get truth? How can you get peace without knowing what happened to these people? It's not the information per se, it's your right to know and your right to grieve and your right to basically decide what you're going to do with this grief. And I also, because I really like to recognize people and organizations who are doing this massive work, and I, hats off to a large network of civil society organizations, something like 250. It's huge, Sania, organizations in Syria, and the network is called Madaniya, which is a translation of a civil institution. And many organizations, many of these 250 members, their struggle is their right to the truth and knowing what happened to the disappeared. Regardless of, it's not about retribution now. It's the right for truth and the ways in which truth and justice are interconnected.
So even after conflicts end, true peace isn't really ever achieved. And without knowing the truth, there is no future that you can build on, because the whole history, the past has been wiped out, and you have no idea where the disappeared are, what happened to the men, how do women now then move forward with their lives, what do they do? How do you think militarized societies, which you just spoke about, in Lebanon, we see that a lot, people have guns for protection. It's also part of patriarchy, but also through a political lens, militarized societies and the glorification of violence, that I have the right to shoot, I have the right to kill if I want to. How do you think that is continuing to hinder peace, especially for women and especially in Lebanon right now?
Tania, I don't think peace and carrying arms can coexist. It's an oxymoron, as we call it. They cannot coexist. And Lebanon has been a case in point in terms of who is carrying arms, for what purpose, for what stated purpose versus the real purpose. how and when are these arms essentially, I have to say, used internally rather than to protect borders? Or let me just also be clear that I myself am a pacifist. So no matter what the circumstances are, I do not and will not condone the resolution of anything. No matter how heinous the crime is, I will never condone a resolution through military violence. So, but you have this situation which, and I think what you said, and I agree with, has been allowed to continue and has been allowed to stay on. And of course, let's not forget that all our conflicts in the region are interconnected, and they are played out locally, but or maybe at times cross borders. However, they are not in isolation and they are not interconnected. Okay, and we need to add another factor to this, is that in any case, that issue, how it is framed in the region and in other regions, in any patriarchal setup, it is framed as a private personal issue. So we do not talk about it in quote unquote peaceful time. And so in a situation of active conflict, so it's even more deprioritized. It's not an issue. Well, we really need to remind ourselves first and foremost that the fact that there is a conflict, the fact that communities are, blown to smithereens and bombarded, does not stop all forms of violence against women, does not stop rape. It actually increases it. It does not make suddenly male partners all of a sudden kind, and to the contrary, it exacerbates this, and it adds to it the violence and the general violence and the gender-based violence that comes from the oppressor, that comes from those who are bombarding you. So, and that's why we keep talking about the gendered impact of violence. It is not the same for everybody. It's actually different layers. And so you cannot have a blanket definition of peace, because some people, because of what they are and who they are and where they were, they have been affected in a different way. And it's a different kind of impact because it's not recognized. It's not recognized. So you were raped during the war. Women are not going to talk about it because it's still shameful.
Social stigma.
Social stigma, and it's not because it was a war that it's a social. It stops being a stigma. I mean, I think it was just a few weeks ago that we heard the story from Sudan about the 130 women who chose to kill themselves because they knew they were going to be raped. We also have anecdotal evidence, I would say, anecdotal stories from Libya a few years ago about similar recurrence. And what is scary and what should concern us is that we all know it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And rather than doing something about it, and we know what you can do about it, then the victims are victimized doubly and triply.
Yeah. In terms of, the women's experiences in Lebanon over the years and also right now, how do you think recognition through either political frameworks or through the organizations that have been working, how do you think that is shaping the future of peace-building frameworks? And moving forward, how do you think they will be implemented? Do you think it will succeed? Do you think that change is happening in the current, we are in the middle of amidst many wars, but also Lebanon has already itself gone through a lot of changes over the past couple of years. Do you think these frameworks right now are going to bring any changes?
I think we're definitely in a moment that is started by being different. The election of the new president, the new prime minister, who, by the way, is an alumni of our university. So, and many cabinet members are alumni of the American University of Beirut. So the discourse is different. The intentions are different. What we saw during the first week was actually, what we wanted to hear. I don't expect miracles, and the challenges are great. But actually, if there is going to be any serious change, I don't think we will have the luxury of having more windows of opportunities. My worry is that the changes that we want and that we deserve and which are rightful and which all of us think that would lead to a just and a sustainable peace means actually what this actually mean is that departing from the old ways. And the old ways include unlawfully militarized groups, corruption at the core of institutions, I mean, really at the core, and then a new system of laws that secures equality, justice, inclusion, and a robust civil society. A civil society that is independent, that has the space to maneuver, that can act as a watchdog, and that has the freedom to organize. And these are not small asks, So, and I think what all of us are doing is basically playing our parts. At the Asfari Institute, what we're trying to do is create the knowledge that is needed for this moment, create the space for civil society to convene, support policy processes that want to be supported, and also being, as I said, a watchdog. But it's an unprecedented window of opportunity, which it's for all. I mean, we all have to be all hands on deck because it may not happen again.
Now, just to talk about lessons that the MENA region can learn from other experiences, for example, Rwanda, Yugoslavia, where international justice mechanisms addressed and they acknowledged gender-based violence and they found ways to put a stop to it, or at least hold some amount of accountability. Yeah. Looking at that, what lessons can the MENA region learn from those countries?
I would add also to these countries, the countries in Latin America, where there has been and continues to be a very transparent processes, whether in Argentina or in Colombia or in Mexico or in Chile, where truth became a priority, that you couldn't move to the next phase without truth. And I think the lessons that we learn is, at least for me and in conversation with other people, is persisting in this struggle, persisting in demanding the truth, because you can trust the powers that be, that they will wait for you to wear out. And this is what they have been doing to Lebanon. They have been waiting for the families to die one after the other. And people have been disappearing of all age. So how do you continue to make this a national issue that is accompanied with an accountability process? Yeah. That's a very important lesson. It's not just important for us in Lebanon, but in neighboring. And I keep mentioning Syria because of what is happening there, and because of the interconnectedness between the two countries, particularly during the war. And because of also the very tense relationships that we also need to address and move after we've addressed this. So the persistence in this, beyond those who were alive when the disappearance happened, the persistence of making the truth a national demand, not the demand only of thousands of people. That's number one. And I think the second thing is the recognition of the institutional public, societal, community, political recognition of the important work that women kept on doing, oftentimes in an invisible way, in terms of keeping this issue alive. And this, we found it everywhere. Thirdly is, if we want the truth, there are no taboo issues. And this is where it's really maybe high time that we revisit and get rid of all of our societal taboos. It's not if rape has happened, and we know that rape has happened, and we know that sexual violence has happened, it's because of a violent patriarchal system that has been exacerbated, empowered by war and conflict, and never addressed. By recognizing this as a weapon of war, on the one hand, but a weapon of war that it was possible to have this as a weapon of war because it was possible before the war, because that was the situation before the war. Because militiamen know that if they want to shame their enemy, they shame them through their women, and vice versa. So unless you address this as something that is faulty, seriously faulty and violent within our own societies, we can't get. So I think, the persistence in justice and the refusing impunity it's not about vengeance. It's not about being vengeful. It's about justice, and it's about not allowing impunity to become a fact of life, because it seeps into all aspects of life, not just during conflict. It's about the role of women. It's about a free and robust and accountable and transparent civil society. And it's about that, understanding that it's a long-term thing. It's not something that is going to be achieved immediately.
All right, so we've got time for just one last question, ending on a positive note. Despite all these long-standing challenges, what gives you hope for the future of peace building in Lebanon and the broader region, especially when it comes to women's role in shaping that future?
If I didn't have hope, I wouldn't be here having this conversation. And I think I have hope because there are many of us out there who still want to speak out, who still want to engage with people like you, who still want to engage with other people through people like you, in basically sharing what is happening, talking about how important it is to go be. It's to actually have the uncomfortable conversation, to actually fight for what is right, and to maintain that, peace building cannot be only done by those who killed each other.
Yeah.
These are the people who killed each other. The actors of peace and the makers of peace are somewhere else. Yeah. And peace will not happen if everybody is not included, and it will not happen if women's voices are not there. And what keeps me going is that women's voices are there, and that despite everything, we have an amazingly diverse, multi-generational, smart and robust civil society that keeps challenging, despite everything. Despite the lack of electricity, for instance, whatever it takes. And I think if they haven't taken us down until now, chances are, many of us will be there for the long haul.
Yeah. So whatever it takes. On that note, thank you so much, Lina, for joining us and sharing your powerful insights and deep expertise. It's been wonderful to have you on the Sania Farooqui Show.
Thank you, Sania, and good luck with your work. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. If you found this conversation valuable, please share it, subscribe, and leave us a review. It helps us reach more people who care about justice, equality, and peace. This episode is part of our ongoing partnership with IPS News, where the full interview and article are also available. I'm Sania Farooqui, and I'll see you next time on the Sania Farooqui Show, where we continue to bring you voices that matter from the front lines of change. Until then, take care and stay engaged.